Hi, I'm Rich Booker, and this is The Rich Booker Show. Real local news and political talk on Radnor Studio 21. This is the second episode of The Rich Booker Show, and really glad to be working with Radnor Studio 21. This past week, we had a big national event in the area. It was a big golf tournament at Aronimink Golf Club, the BMW Championship. And I spent several days out there walking with several of the groups. And it was a great event. Although we had a lot of rain, it was delayed. We finished just on Monday of this past week. And we had Keegan Bradley beating Justin Rose for the championship. So it was a great event. And a lot of people from the area came out and enjoyed it. Today I have with me Chip Layfield. Chip is a local political strategist and a small businessman in Radnor. And Chip brings a wealth of political knowledge, insight, and historic perspective. So Chip, tell us a little bit about yourself and how we first met and some of your background in local politics.
Okay, well, thanks for having me on, Rich. This is kind of fun. I love being back here at Radnor Studio 21. It is a fabulous resource that we have here in Radnor, broadcast throughout Delaware County, I believe now, on some stations. We go back to a school board race where I first approached your wife to run, and she demurred, but you ran, and I was thrilled because
2002?
2002, yeah. You brought a lot of excitement to the group, and we were running at that time on the issue of keeping the middle school in Wayne, which the community overwhelmingly wanted. The administration had its own ideas, and we were successful in that.
We were. We had a primary battle there, and I don't remember Patty being asked first, but I'll take your word for it. Maybe that was. I'll take your word for it. But 2002, I first ran for school board, and we had a primary, and we won the primary. And then we went on to win the general election, and was all precipitated around the issue of keeping the middle school in Wayne, which we were ultimately successful in doing. So it was
it was an epic primary. We had I helped recruit the Democrats. I helped recruit the Republicans, and then we had a independent PAC, the SOS Save Our Schools. So I had a PAC, candidates, and everything going into the primary. And what was amazing was the quality of the candidates on all sides they were just really top notch. And several continued to run for election, like Brucey Rappaport comes to mind. But they were just a phenomenal group of candidates, so we had that time out.
So you have been involved with the strategic input mainly for the local Democrat party in Radnor, but have also helped various candidates in many different races, including more recently.
Yeah, I would say now mostly Democrats, but during that race I was a Republican, and I was recruiting the Democrats at that time and working with them. But I did switch parties from Republican to Democrat after that primary because I felt those guys were kind of going off the cliff. They weren't likely to win, and I was asking them to put their names out there, so I felt loyalty to them that I felt that I should go too. So I switched parties, became a Democrat. I've always voted Democrat on the national issue, hardcore Democrat in that way. But locally, I don't really see much of a difference between Democrats and Republicans. It's really a matter of character, issues, and that sort of thing. But it fundamentally gets down to character.
Well, I see quite a difference between the Republicans and Democrats in Radnor and on a lot of different issues. But I think what you're saying is that there are a lot of common themes that transcend partisanship that are important to the local people and the local issues in Radnor, and it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is on these local issues.
Well, you're unique, obviously. I mean, you have a pretty defined political position. You're, pretty far to the right on national issues.
I'm very strongly passionate about conservative issues, lower taxes, smaller government, greater individual liberty and personal responsibility, and try to inculcate all of those values in the political actions I take.
I agree, but I mean, you're probably the farthest one over in the Republicans that are on the board now that way. I think Luke's more middle of the road. And Jake, I'm not quite sure where Jake is on the national issues. And you're out there. You're out there. That's what I love about you.
I'm pretty mainstream. I'm very mainstream and very mainstream and traditional. So what I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about is some of our current issues that face Radnor and what are important to the people in Radnor. And what comes to mind, especially in these very rainy days and a lot of wet weather, and we're facing a hurricane coming in the southern states, we had a very significant rainfall event in August and caused some flooding. And I know that you took some time and spoke with a lot of the constituents and got a lot of input and saw a lot of the results firsthand. Can you tell me about the flooding in Wayne and its impact?
Yeah, definitely. I go back for stormwater pretty far back. I lived on Willow Avenue for about 15 years, so it's always been an issue with the flooding there. But I ran a campaign for a candidate whose main issue had two issues. One was the telecommunications contract, which is not really exciting with the voters, and the other one was stormwater management, and that was in the middle of a drought. So from that time on, I've worked on issues revolving around stormwater management and flood control, and
you've tried to shape policy from a local perspective.
Yeah. Well, more than that, I've participated in. I was on the school district had a public safety group that I joined shortly after the Radnor Elementary School was put in, for the sole purpose to try to get the school district to step up and do more on stormwater, more than was required. That failed. Afterwards, stormwater management and water quality became a big issue, and we did stream bank restorations. We did a beautiful one at the Willows. We had a large segment of the community coming out. Public Works came out. We had bales of coconut leaves and bark for trees to grow, willows to grow. So water quality has been an issue, and sampling the water. In my comments at that meeting, which were controversial, I guess, with some in the administration, I mentioned that I thought Radnor had a horrible record of stormwater management. And
So we had a meeting for the public to come in, and I happened to miss that meeting. I had a family event, and I know you were there, but it was a public meeting to hear from the constituents, right? And you were there.
I think it was there was some legislation that had to be signed declaring it a emergency.
It was emergency. Yeah, right. Emergency declaration, and we also had withdrawn any building permit in response to this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I mentioned there that I thought the township had a poor record, but it goes back to when we bought Forbes Field, now Dipmar. The township put in a storm water management system. It blew out, flooded a neighborhood. Over on North Wayne Field, I was there when they put the original system in. We're hoping that was going to help. That blew out, like within a year it blew out. And then when they redid it, they put the wrong size orifice, the outflow. I guess somebody thought a smaller diameter would reduce it, but what it did is it increased the velocity. So it created that stream. You've heard of people talking about a little kid being washed down the driveway. That was during that event. That failed, and it failed again recently during this storm. I was at the Wawa with Duncan Ubley when he put in the stormwater management system that they're planning to redo now at the Windsor, I think it is.
Is it Banbury?
Yeah, Banbury. And that failed. And I talked to Duncan about that. And we worked together on the middle school. I was working with the commissioners and school board people. We brought in Tom Cahill. We spent $1 million, and that system has failed. It's not even fully hooked up. And the township never implemented the filtration that was 50% of the job, upstream infiltration, because at the time, the commissioner, Bill Spengler, said, I don't get any votes over there. They're over here.
Well,
so that was never done.
Well,
so it doesn't have a good record.
And so that was the point you made, and you were attacked by a variety of people for making that point.
Just be skeptical. Everyone's like, we don't want any more studies. Just go ahead and do it. But you can look at what they've done in the past, and if you see somebody that has a history of only failure, you do want them to take time and to study and to consider what the implications, unintended consequences.
And my philosophy on these stormwater projects is that the stormwater projects that we actually undertake and construct should be those that are designed to provide the greatest marginal reduction in flooding or flood waters per dollar spent. So the metric is the biggest bang for the buck and what projects provide the most benefit per dollar spent. And that's how I prioritize the projects. I think we have a great deal of problem with prioritizing projects because people would rather spend $2 million to get a 10% reduction than $200,000 to get a 50% reduction in flooding, because depending on who it impacts. So there's the old political adage of whose ox is being gored. Right. So that's really what's holding up a lot of these projects. But what I would say about the middle school project, that subsurface drainage and infiltration system has been hooked up. The middle school field has been doing very well in the years since I left in 2007. The area in front off of South Wayne, that area still has not been hooked up, and we had some flooding. But we did attempt to get that hooked up, and the township engineer said it was not feasible to hook that up. We approved it. The Stormwater Advisory Committee approved it, and it was the administration that said, we cannot do it. You can't disrupt all of the underground utilities to make that hookup. And so they said it is not a feasible project. It can't be done for the amount of money that it would have cost tens and tens of millions of dollars, which was not in the budget. So that's what I was told.
You're making my point, right? The township built the system that they can hook up, essentially.
That could be.
Go slow. Check the math. Think about it. That's what I said.
And that makes sense. I think you're right. And in this case, we did have some flooding on North Wayne Avenue with some of the businesses, and Cornerstone was reported to me about $250,000 in damages, right. and I know below Real Pizza is still closed. Last time I went by,
they may not open. That was just really incredibly destructive storm. Yeah, so I did go back to my old neighborhood and I talked to some of my neighbors. I saw a local activist who put a tweet out about a metal plate being over a grate at the AT&T lot, and eventually I got there, but first I went to my neighborhood, and one of the neighbors there, an activist, told me that the township had covered up those grates, and he pointed out that he felt that the velocity of the water and the amount of water, the volume of water was less. So, yeah, I don't know. And then I went to the Radnor Memorial Field and we talked to the guys that were working on it. I'll tell you, that is a hard job. Those guys, they climb inside those tubes and they pull it out 5 gallons.
You mean the North Wayne Field or
North Wayne Field?
Or not Radnor Memorial?
No, North Wayne.
North Wayne Field. Yeah, you said Radnor Memorial.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right.
We did have stormwater problem at that place too years ago, but they fixed that.
But so North Wayne, there was a failure there for that underground system,
yes.
and the wall had actually failed.
Right. And
of the bank.
It wasn't clear exactly what was going on. I knew nothing about this idea of a grate being covered or AT&T lot. Didn't know anything about that. But I bumped into another activist there, and she was adamant that the first person was lying, that there was no cover-up, but she said it was covered up years ago, but it's not covered up now, and that the other person's lying. And in the course of trying to figure out exactly what's going on, I think that was Gail. I think she thought, it sounds like she thought that people were saying the culvert into the field was covered up, and that would have caused the flooding down at Cornerstone and all that area. But I don't think anybody I've never heard anybody but her make that point. It was always this AT&T lot. So we did go up there and we we looked at the lot. There was a piece of metal, looks like an old sign or something up there, that supposedly was covering the grade. And we had the opportunity to talk to some of the AT&T operations people came out and talked. And it was definitely a very interesting storm with unusual hydrodynamics, to say the least. And he was telling us about, I asked him if he had water inside his building, and he said it went up to the 3rd floor. I was skeptical. He showed us videos. It was like a horror movie coming up the stairway. It was limited to the stairway and the service elevator. Didn't go into the rooms.
The AT&T building had floodwaters on the 3rd floor from this storm.
That's what he said. The picture I saw was on the 2nd floor. You could see 2nd floor and the water bubbling up.
Huh.
So it was an incredible storm. It must have been a huge event. In my opinion, I don't know, to what extent that covering would matter, if it was covered or wasn't covered. I don't really know. I know that they felt that it was risking a potential catastrophe because right next to that outlet, there's all these transformers that power the building, which powers the county's 911. So if the water had gotten any higher, and apparently the water was right at that level of the transformers, we could have lost the network hub for AT&T, but also we could have lost all 911 in the height of that flood. So it was a very serious situation that my understanding is the township's doing an investigation to find out who covered that up or how it was covered up or if it was covered up. So they'll find that out. But I think someone needs to think, maybe the Stormwater Committee will think about how do we convey that water in a high water event, so that we don't flood out the businesses, so the water can get underneath the culvert or be held in some other way and not risk catastrophe. But it's really unusual situation.
I'll make sure I follow up with the folks and see exactly what the story is out there. And I did take a look at it, and I want to get to exactly what the issues and what the hydrology is and how it's affecting the area. But North Wayne Field does have the repair in place. I went and looked at it yesterday. It is at least covered up.
That's the emergency repair.
The emergency, is that the emergency?
Yeah, that's the emergency repair.
So that's covered up with dirt and soil and the jute mat. So that looks like it's on its way to being back in service. The second issue I wanted to bring up was one of your favorite issues, a place that you visit often, is the Willows and the refurbishment of the Willows mansion and its function within the park. So that's another area that you've worked on for some time. Tell me a little bit about your history with that.
I'm not currently involved with that, but I did help Tish and Christina and Ted and Joe, kind of pilot their ways through the intricacies of the township bureaucracy, the commissioners and administration, so that they could put forward a coherent program and business plan to move forward. And I have high hopes. We were lucky we were having a meeting, and John, the $1 million donor, just walked in out of the blue and offered the township. So
we have a $1 million, actually 1.1, I think, 1.1 million, I think that's the number. And the township's putting in $2.8 million to rebuild the Willows and to make it a functional space for the public to use, in conjunction with the Willows Park.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah, that's the plan. That's a lot of money. That's a huge capital expenditure for us. I think they have the vision. I know there's been some changes, so I don't know really exactly. You probably know more about it than I do, where we are currently. I saw they took down some trees. They put a gate up there for some bizarre reason. I don't fully understand what that's all about.
I had heard about there's a gate that's been put up.
It's actually like a little plastic chain.
There's a gate that's at the parking lot, so you can't get to the Willows building anymore. And people are complaining about. You've heard some.
Oh yeah. I'd say you get maybe 100 people, 150 a day in good season up there. You have walkers, dog walkers, hikers. And now it's the height of the season where people are finishing up their harvest, and all the gardeners now have to walk a huge distance to get there. Because now you closed off the other parking lot.
Why do the gardeners go up to the building?
because you can then walk downhill to your garden.
Okay.
It's much closer. And
So
you're usually
now-
carrying several pounds of
So now they have to park down below and then walk the driveway all the way up to.
They walk over the bridge, and they have to walk through the grass, through the riparian zone to the park that way, then up to their plots. So it's considerably longer distance, and it's inconvenient. And everybody understands that if it's during construction, of course, but there's literally no reason for it to be closed at this point. There was talk of shingles falling off the building, but
Yeah, I think that's it's the issue is that since the building is under construction, that this is a safety concern, and that, you know, are people walking by?
there's no construction's not going to start for a year and a half. There's no construction going on. Okay, the township, about going back a year and a half, had the roof repaired. They had a local company go up, knock off the loose shingles, put tin underneath so that it would be watertight, because it had been allowed to deteriorate for 5 or 6 years without any upkeep at all. So the township repaired that roof and tightened up the shingles. In the course of that, undoubtedly, some scraps and crumbs and maybe in a shingle or two fell off, because working on a slate roof, I can tell you, anything that hits the roof is off the roof.
Well, I think that's terracotta tiles, right? Isn't it? It's tiles.
Yeah,
it's those rounded tiles.
Yeah, it is. But the same function. There's no friction up there. Everything is going to go off. So I would think that the tiles that they found, I think the report said tiles, they found, I think undoubtedly came from that. But, you know, we have buildings, we have other parks with buildings where things are falling off the roofs where they probably should be closed down. But this building is tight, it has been tight, and it's a major inconvenience to the residents, the taxpayers that use that park and that facility. And then you couple it with closing the other parking lot at the Willows, the lower lot, and that's a lot that gets, again, on the weekends and on a nice sunny day, you get hundreds of people a day in there. And that's been closed for well over a week with like 2 buses parked in there. You just kind of wonder what the priorities are.
We have, we're coming into the midterm season for congressional races,
right.
And we have a couple of local races here for the fifth. In my ward, the second ward, we have the 5th congressional district, and that's all of Radnor, as well as in my ward the race for the 166th Pennsylvania House district. So we have Baltazar Rubio is running against Greg Vitale, and we have Pearl Kim, Republican, running against Mary Gay Scanlon. Any thoughts on those races as we move forward here?
I'm a big Greg Vitale fan. I used to do campaign work for him, did his literature and signs and things like that. And
he's been criticized for not really accomplish anything in 25 years.
Yeah, probably. I'd have a hard time saying what his accomplishments are. But he's a good government guy that I think that's what people look at when they look at him. And he has fabulous constituent services. I mean, it's amazing, really. He's got a great staff, and he's a good guy in there for all the right reasons. So I would go with Greg there. I know Baltazar has been on the show.
He was on this show,
yeah.
and Baltazar is he's actually run for Pennsylvania House in the past, so this is the second attempt, and was former school board local guy from Haverford. But what do you think about the strategy for the Republicans and for the Democrats coming into these elections locally? How does it bear on our local races, which we'll have next November?
Yeah, there's a real complexity there, because what I'll kind of just do like a big overview of what's going on. You have candidates. I'll bring it down to the commissioners. So Democrats came in basically on what they're calling a blue wave, and what that means is it's just an emotional vote. You don't like Trump, you vote Democrat. So they're running on national issues essentially, and then once they're elected, they really don't know why they're there, and they defer to the administration on all points. You can see somebody like Jack Larkin, who I had, hoped that he would be good, he'd be pragmatic, and I've been part of an email thing with him, and he's not at all. He's very much deferential, very much like Lisa. The problem for the Republicans, I think, locally, would be that the Democrats are just going to wipe you out coming up in this election, And I think that's probably going to carry on for a while, long while. And as far as I can see, I think the Democrats are going to be in power in Radnor for at least 6 years. But there's all sorts of events that can happen that can be exploited by you guys that can take over. And I tried to talk to some of the Democratic commissioners recently and tell them that they really have to stop, acting as reactionaries and start focusing on the idea of governing and put together a administration and a board that can, build bridges, as they say, instead of tearing them down, and stop all the division and divisiveness. I think the leadership of the Democrats locally view the citizens as the problem, that the criticism is the problem. But they should take a broader view, and the Republicans as well, and look at really where are these divisions coming from? How do these events become so divisive?
Well, I believe that the blue wave is overdone. I think that the polls are not accurate because there's so many people, especially Republicans, who are not going to admit to a pollster and others how they're going to vote. And I think that was the underlying theme in the 2016 presidential election. But as you know, I am a person who takes the constituents and the needs of the taxpayers and puts that above.
Yeah.
And I'm responsive
Yes.
to those irrespective of party or political bias. And that's why I have developed a lot of following from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
Without,
you do your homework. You're highly principled. Now, people may not agree with you, but you're very clear on what you're doing and why you're doing it.
And everything that I do is really designed to be to serve the best interests of the township. One of the issues that's come up recently, we had an incident which was the release of confidential township materials to the Radnor Democrat Party for use in attempting to subvert the election results in 2017. And that was something that I know that you've been following.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about the implication of some type of collusion with someone from the township and the Democrat Party attempting to affect the election outcome? And will we see it again?
I don't know why you wouldn't see it again, basically, because nothing really has happened. Nothing's happened to anybody, really. I think the race that you were in my experience, was the most negative campaign in Radnor history that I've seen over 30 years or so. So it was just an unbelievable campaign where you obviously had elements of the administration and Democrat commissioners and Democrat committee people working together in unison to do just a hatchet job on you, and they were sloppy in their presentation, and they left confidential testimony from the police chief in their sworn complaint. I did bump into McCone, who I've known for, 50 years or something, so I've known him for a long time. And I told him that I considered him, and that would go for Jim Higgins, Commissioner Higgins, former commissioner, and John Nagel. These are people that I've known for a long, long time, and I don't always agree with them, but I always considered them to be principled, honorable people. And this is anything but principled, anything but honorary. It's shameful, and I don't think the public's fully aware of the extent of what took place and the fact that no one's taken responsibility for it.
And it subverts our political system of accountability to the taxpayers and to the constituents. The accountability rests with the politicians who are elected, and they can't and should not be subverted by those who are appointed or administrative in nature in the township to run their own government.
It depends who it was in the administration, but administrators should not be picking their bosses. We don't have a mayor in this town, so they're underneath you, right? And you're underneath us. So the responsible party is the party that runs for election. And it has to remain that way. That's in a sense how I think the township's become dysfunctional. Even though everything's fabulous, we got a great township, great public services, great police force, great park system. I'm not sure that the operations at the government level, government commissioner level, is working as designed, with everybody assuming responsibility.
Well, we're working on that, and we're going to improve that. So I'd like to thank you, Chip, for appearing on the Rich Booker Show on Radnor Studio 21, real local news and political talk. And we'll see you next time.